A maid's daughter risked her entire future to help an injured boy bleeding out at school, never suspecting that the charity case she saved was actually the secret son of a billionaire. The silence in the locker room was heavier than the metallic smell of blood. On the white tiles, a boy lay dying, ignored by the wealthy students who simply stepped over him as if he were trash. For Emily, the janitor's daughter, crossing that threshold wasn't just a violation of school policy. It was a death sentence for her family's survival. She knew that saving him meant losing her scholarship, her mother's job, and their only home. But as she knelt in the grime to stop the bleeding, she didn't realize she was holding the secret heir to a billion-dollar empire, or that her act of mercy was about to cost her everything. Emily knelt in the grime, risking her scholarship to save a stranger everyone else treated like trash. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late November, and the air inside the prestigious Oak Creek Academy smelled of floor wax and damp wool. The heavy rain battered against the high windows of the gymnasium, drowning out the distant sound of luxury cars idling in the pickup lane. Emily Carter, a 17-year-old with pale blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, was not rushing to a chauffeured sedan. She was waiting for her mother, Linda, who was finishing her shift mopping the administrative wing. Emily sat on a bench near the boys' locker room, reviewing her history notes. She was invisible here. As the daughter of the school's head custodian, she attended Oak Creek on a precarious staff family scholarship. One wrong move, one failing grade, one complaint from a wealthy parent, and she would be back at the public high school in the city. Grandpa Frank always said, "Keep your head down and your eyes open," she whispered to herself, tracing the spine of her worn textbook. Her grandfather, a decorated combat medic from the Korean War, had raised her on stories of duty and precision. He had passed away 2 years ago, but his voice was still the loudest one in her head. A sudden crash from inside the boys' locker room shattered her concentration. It was the sound of metal hitting tile, followed by a sickening thud. Then, silence. Emily looked around. The hallway was empty, save for a few students at the far end laughing at a video on a phone. They hadn't heard, or they didn't care. She hesitated. The boys' locker room was strictly off-limits. Entering it was grounds for immediate suspension. "Keep your head down," Grandpa Frank would have warned. But then she heard a low groan. It wasn't a cry for attention. It was the sound of someone in genuine, suppressed agony. Emily shoved her book into her backpack and stood up. She pushed the heavy double doors open and slipped inside. The locker room was humid and smelled of sweat and expensive cologne. In the back corner, near the showers, a boy was curled on the floor. He was surrounded by overturned benches and scattered equipment. He wore the school uniform, navy blazer, khaki trousers, but it was torn at the shoulder and smeared with dirt. Emily rushed over, her sneakers squeaking on the wet tile. "Hey, can you hear me?" The boy didn't answer. He was clutching his ribs, his breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps. Blood matted his dark hair and dripped steadily onto the white tiles, pooling near his ear. He looked about her age, maybe a little older, with a sharp jawline and a build that suggested he was an athlete, though right now he looked broken. She recognized him vaguely. He was the new kid who had transferred a month ago. He kept to himself, ate lunch alone behind the bleachers, and wore a uniform that always looked slightly too big, as if it were a hand-me-down. The rumor mill said he was a charity case, a foster kid the school took in for tax breaks. That made him a target. "I'm going to check your head," Emily said, her voice steady. She didn't sound like a terrified teenager. She sounded like the granddaughter of a combat medic. She gently moved his hand. A nasty gash ran along his hairline, deep and angry. His skin was pale, clammy. "You're going into shock," she assessed. She shrugged off her own thick cardigan and bundled it into a pillow, sliding it carefully under his head. "I need to stop this bleeding." She looked around. Nothing but dirty towels. She couldn't use those. The infection risk was too high. Without hesitating, she reached into her backpack and pulled out her own clean gym shirt, pressing it firmly against the wound on his head. The boy winced, his eyes fluttering open. They were a startling shade of gray, clouded with pain. He tried to pull away, his instinct purely defensive. "Stay still," Emily commanded, her tone firm but kind. "I've got you. You took a bad hit." They left," he rasped, his voice cracking. "Don't talk. Save your breath." Footsteps echoed near the entrance. Emily's heart hammered against her ribs. If she was caught here with a boy, especially in this position, the narrative would be spun against her instantly. "Well, look what we have here," a sneering voice echoed off the lockers. Emily didn't look up. She knew the voice. Brad Henderson, the captain of the football team and the son of the vice principal. "The janitor's girl and the stray dog," Brad laughed, walking closer. Two of his teammates flanked him, smirking. "We were just teaching the new guy a lesson about hierarchy. Didn't think he'd need a nurse." "He's bleeding, Brad," Emily said, applying more pressure to the wound. "He needs a doctor. Call the nurse." "The nurse went home at 4, Brad said, checking his expensive watch. "And my dad doesn't like 911 calls coming to the school. Bad for the image. Just leave him. He'll wake up and walk it off. It's just a scratch." "He has a concussion and possibly broken ribs," Emily snapped, her anger flaring hotter than her fear. "If he isn't treated, he could have internal bleeding. Help me lift him." Brad scoffed, kicking the boy's sneaker with the toe of his boot. "I'm not touching him, and neither should you. You know the rules, Emily. No girls in here. If my dad walks in, you're the one who gets suspended, not me." The boy on the floor groaned again, his hand gripping Emily's wrist with surprising strength. He was terrified. "I don't care about the rules," Emily said, looking Brad directly in the eyes. "I care about him not dying on the floor." Brad's smirk vanished. He stepped closer, looming over her. "You're really pushing your luck, Carter. You think because your mom scrubs the toilets you get special treatment? Leave him. Now." Emily remembered the stories her grandfather told her about the war. You don't leave a man behind. Not ever. It doesn't matter if he's a general or a private. You do the job. "No," Emily said. Brad stared at her, stunned by the defiance from the girl who usually turned invisible when he walked by. He let out a harsh laugh. "Fine. Have it your way. But don't say I didn't warn you." He turned to his friends. "Let's go. The smell in here is getting worse." They sauntered out, leaving the heavy doors swinging behind them. Emily didn't waste a second. She turned back to the boy. "What's your name?" "Michael," he whispered. "Okay, Michael. I'm Emily. I'm going to fix you up enough to get you to my mom's car. We're taking you to the hospital. I don't care what Brad says." She opened her backpack again. She carried a small, dense first aid kit, a habit Grandpa Frank had insisted on. "Always be ready, Em." She pulled out antiseptic wipes, gauze pads, and medical tape. She worked with practiced efficiency. She cleaned the gash on his forehead, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Michael watched her, his gray eyes tracking her every movement. He had expected her to run when Brad threatened her. People always ran. "This will sting," she murmured. She applied the antiseptic. He hissed, but didn't pull away. She taped the gauze down securely, checking his pupils as she worked. They were responsive, which was good. "Can you breathe deeply for me?" she asked. Michael tried, but flinched. "Left side. Hurts. Probably a bruised rib. We won't wrap it, that restricts breathing. We need to get you up." She maneuvered her arm under his shoulders. "On 3. 1, 2, 3. She hauled him up. He was heavy, dead weight leaning against her, but she planted her feet and held him. They moved slowly toward the door. Just as they reached the hallway, the doors swung open again. This time, it wasn't Brad. It was Vice Principal Henderson. A tall, imposing man with a perfectly knotted tie and a face that looked like it was carved from granite. He stared at Emily, her arm around the charity case, blood on her uniform shirt. "Miss Carter," Henderson said, his voice dangerously calm. Would you like to explain why you are dragging a student through the hallway after hours, looking like you've been in a street brawl? He's hurt, sir, Emily said, shifting Michael's weight to keep him upright. Brad and his friends… Stop. Henderson cut her off, holding up a hand. I don't want to hear wild accusations against exemplary students. I see a boy who likely got into a fight he couldn't handle, and a girl who is violating school policy by being in restricted areas. He needs a hospital, Emily insisted. He has a head wound. Henderson looked at Michael with disdain. He looks like he needs a shower and a lesson in conduct. And you, Miss Carter, you have disappointed me. This institution is built on order. You are creating chaos. Helping someone isn't chaos, Emily shot back. The vice principal's eyes narrowed. Your mother's employment hangs by a thread, Emily, and your scholarship is even thinner. Leave the boy here. Security will escort him off the premises. You go find your mother and go home. If I see you near him again, you won't be coming back on Monday. Michael tried to stand on his own, pulling away from Emily to spare her. Go, he wheezed. I'll be fine. Emily looked at Henderson, then at Michael. She saw the blood seeping through the gauze she had just applied. She saw the fear Michael was trying to hide. She tightened her grip on Michael's waist. I'm taking him to the hospital, Emily said, her voice clear and final. You can expel me on Monday, but today I'm doing what's right. She walked past the vice principal, dragging Michael with her. Henderson was so shocked by the sheer audacity that he didn't physically stop them. He just watched them go, his face turning a deep, furious red. You've made a grave mistake, Miss Carter, he shouted down the hallway. Emily didn't look back. She got Michael out the side door and into the pouring rain. Her mother's old station wagon was waiting at the curb, the engine idling. Linda Carter jumped out of the car, her face pale with worry when she saw the blood. Emily! Oh my God, what happened? Open the door, Mom. We need to go to St. Jude's. Now. They bundled Michael into the back seat. Emily climbed in beside him, pressing a fresh towel against his head as the car pulled away, splashing through the deep puddles. Michael looked at her, his vision blurring. The pain was intense, but the warmth of her hand on his shoulder was grounding. Why? He whispered, his head lolling back against the seat. You lost everything. Emily looked out the window at the retreating silhouette of the school that had been her only ticket to a better life. She felt a pang of terror in her stomach, but beneath it, the solid steel of conviction. You're not trash, Michael, she said softly, and I'm not going to let them treat you like you are. Michael closed his eyes. As darkness took him, he didn't think about the pain. He thought about the girl with the blonde ponytail who had stood up to a giant for him. He reached into his pocket with a trembling hand, touching the sleek, hidden phone he had kept turned off for weeks. He didn't have the strength to pull it out, but he made a silent vow. If he survived this, Emily Carter would never have to worry about a scholarship again. But for now, the car rattled into the night, carrying a terrified maid's daughter and the secret heir to a billion-dollar empire, driving away from the only world they both knew. The drive to St. Jude's Hospital was a blur of rain-streaked windows and the rhythmic thump-thump of the station wagon's windshield wipers fighting a losing battle against the storm. Inside the car, the air was thick with tension. Linda drove with both hands gripping the wheel so tightly her knuckles were white. She didn't yell. She didn't scold. That silence was worse than any shouting match. It was the silence of a woman calculating how much gas was left in the tank and how many days of food were in the pantry. In the back seat, Emily kept the pressure applied to Michael's head wound. The towel was heavy now, warm and damp. Stay awake, Michael, Emily said softly. Tell me something. Anything. Michael blinked, fighting the heaviness in his eyelids. The pain in his ribs was a dull, throbbing ache that spiked every time the car hit a pothole. I like your car, he lied, his voice weak. It smells like vanilla. It smells like cleaning supplies and old upholstery, Emily corrected him with a faint, sad smile. My mom buys the vanilla air fresheners in bulk to hide the chemical smell. She says she doesn't want to bring work home, but the smell follows her anyway. Michael turned his head slightly to look at her. In the passing streetlights, her face was a mixture of grit and exhaustion. She looked like a soldier in the trenches, just like the stories she had mentioned. "You're in trouble," Michael said. It wasn't a question. "I'm always in trouble," Emily replied. "Usually for reading in the hallway or wearing the wrong color socks. Saving a life is a better reason than most." Linda glanced in the rearview mirror. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "Emily, Vice Principal Henderson called my cell phone 3 times while we were walking to the car. I didn't answer, but we both know what that message is going to say." "He can't fire you for me helping a student, Mom," Emily argued, though her voice lacked conviction. "That's illegal. It's retaliation." "Distinctive legal rights don't mean much to people like Henderson," Linda said, her voice trembling. "He'll say I left my post. He'll say you trespassed. He'll find a reason. That job was the only thing keeping the lights on." The car hit a bump, and Michael groaned. Emily winced in sympathy. "Let's worry about the lights later, Mom. Right now we just need a doctor." They pulled into the emergency bay of St. Jude's. It was a stark contrast to the private clinics Michael was used to. There were no valet attendants, no quiet waiting rooms with soft jazz. The automatic doors slid open to reveal a chaotic scene. A crying baby, an elderly man coughing violently, and a line of people looking tired and forgotten. Linda parked the car and rushed to get a wheelchair. Together, they helped Michael out of the back seat. He felt dizzy, his legs like jelly, but he leaned into Emily, trusting her completely. At the intake desk, a harried nurse with dark circles under her eyes barely looked up. "Name? Insurance?" "Michael." Emily paused. She looked at him. "Do you have your insurance card?" Michael hesitated. He had a card in his wallet, a black card that would alert his family's private physicians and security team within minutes. If he used it, his father would know he was here. His father would send the helicopter. He would be pulled out of school, locked away in the penthouse for his own safety. And he would never see Emily again. He wanted to stay. He wanted to see this through. "No insurance," Michael said, his voice raspy. "My name is Michael Miller." He used his mother's maiden name, a common enough name to avoid flags. The nurse sighed, typing it in. "Okay, Mr. Miller. Sit in the waiting area. We'll call you." "He has a head injury and has lost consciousness," Emily pressed, leaning over the counter. Her grandfather's training kicked in again. "He needs a CT scan to rule out a subdural hematoma. He is disoriented and his pupils were sluggish earlier. He can't just sit in a chair." The nurse looked up, surprised by the medical terminology coming from a teenager in a rain-soaked school uniform. She looked at Michael, really looked at him this time, seeing the blood-soaked towel and the pale sheen of his skin. "Trauma 2, the nurse said, pointing to the double doors. "Take him back. I'll get the doctor." Emily guided the wheelchair through the doors. They found an empty curtained bay. She helped him onto the narrow bed. "You know a lot of big words," Michael said, trying to smile as he lay back against the crinkly paper pillow. "Grandpa Frank made me memorize the Merck manual when I was 12, Emily said, checking his pulse again. He said, "Emily, the world is dangerous. Competence is your only shield." He sounds intense. He was. He was also the best man I ever knew. He raised me after my dad left. Emily pulled a blanket over him. "He taught me that you don't look away when things get ugly. That's when you look closer." A young resident doctor bustled in, snapping on latex gloves. He examined Michael quickly, shining a light in his eyes and palpating his ribs. 3 stitches for the head. Ribs are likely bruised, maybe a hairline fracture. "You're lucky, kid. An inch lower and you'd have lost that eye." The doctor began preparing a suture kit. "I'm going to numb the area. This will pinch." Emily stood by the head of the bed. Without thinking, she took Michael's hand. His fingers curled around hers, holding on tight. He focused on her face, ignoring the needle. So, Michael said, trying to distract himself as the doctor worked. What does Emily Carter do when she isn't saving stray dogs? She studies, Emily said. She works part-time at the diner on weekends, and she dreams of going to medical school. I want to be a trauma surgeon. I want to fix things that are broken. You're already doing it, Michael murmured. The procedure took 20 minutes. When the doctor finished, he gave them a list of concussion protocols and a prescription for painkillers. You can go home, but someone needs to wake you up every 2 hours tonight. He can't go home, Linda said from the doorway. She had been pacing the hall. He said his dad is a truck driver on a long-haul route. No one is home. Emily looked at Michael. Is that true? Michael felt a pang of guilt. His father was actually in Tokyo, closing a merger for their tech conglomerate. He wasn't a truck driver. He was Richard Sterling, a man who owned shipping fleets, not the trucks themselves. But the lie was necessary. Yeah, Michael said. It's just me. Linda rubbed her temples. She looked at the boy, beaten, alone, with no money and no advocate. Then she looked at her daughter, who was looking at her with wide, pleading eyes. We can't leave him here, Emily said. He needs monitoring. Linda sighed, a long, weary exhale that seemed to deflate her entire posture. Fine, he can sleep on the couch, but I'm calling social services in the morning if we can't reach his father. Thank you, Mom, Emily said, hugging her mother fiercely. They left the hospital an hour later. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and black under the city lights. The drive to the Carter apartment was silent, but different this time. The sharp edge of panic had dulled into a heavy, somber reality. They lived in a small complex on the south side of town, the kind of place where the elevator was always broken and the neighbors knew each other's business through the thin walls. They walked up the 3 flights of stairs. The apartment was tiny but spotless. It was filled with books, stacks of them in every corner. Grandpa Frank's old armchair sat in the living room like a throne. Linda set up the couch with fresh sheets. Here, she said, handing Michael a pair of oversized sweatpants that had belonged to Emily's grandfather. These will be huge, but they're clean. The bathroom is down the hall. While Michael changed, Emily went into the kitchen to make tea. Linda sat at the small dinette table, her phone in her hand. She stared at the screen. Mom? Emily placed a mug of chamomile tea in front of her. Did he call again? Linda nodded slowly. She didn't look up. He sent a text. Do not report tomorrow. Your final check will be mailed. Your daughter is barred from campus pending an expulsion hearing. The room went dead silent. The refrigerator hummed in the corner. Emily felt the floor drop out from under her. Expulsion? For what? Helping someone? For insubordination. For endangering a student. He can make up whatever he wants, Em. He's the vice principal. We're nobody. Linda's voice cracked. I have $80 in the checking account. Rent is due on Tuesday. Emily sank into the chair opposite her mother. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a cold, hollow dread. She had done the right thing. She knew she had. But the cost was catastrophic. She had destroyed their fragile stability. I'll pick up extra shifts at the diner, Emily said quickly. I can work nights. We can fight the expulsion. I'll go to the school board. The school board is made up of Henderson's golf buddies, Linda said, wiping a tear from her cheek. We lost, Emily. We tried to play their game, and we lost. Michael stood in the hallway, listening. He wore the old gray sweatpants and his blood-stained shirt. He heard the despair in Linda's voice. He heard the ruin he had caused. He looked at the apartment. It was humble, almost poor, but it was warm. It was a home. He saw the photos on the wall. Emily and her mom laughing, an old man in a uniform saluting. There was love here. Real, messy, sacrificial love. His own home was a cold museum of glass and steel, staffed by people paid to care. He retreated quietly into the bathroom and locked the door. He sat on the edge of the tub and pulled out his phone again. It had 4% battery left. He powered it on. Dozens of notifications flooded the screen. Missed calls from father, security chief, headmaster. He ignored them all. He opened his banking app. The balance displayed was a string of numbers that could buy this entire apartment complex 10 times over. He couldn't transfer money to them directly. It would raise too many questions. He had to be smarter. He had to fix this without breaking his cover, because for the first time in his life, he had a friend who liked him for him, not for the balance on this screen. He typed a text message to a number saved simply as Arthur, his father's personal fixer and the one man Michael trusted. Message: I am safe. Do not track this phone. I need you to handle a situation at Oak Creek Academy immediately. Vice Principal Henderson fired a staff member, Linda Carter, and expelled her daughter, Emily. This is a mistake. Fix it. Anonymous donor, scholarship, grant. I don't care how you do it. Reinstate them with a raise and a full apology. Do not reveal it came from me. If you do, I disappear for good. I mean it, Arthur. He hit send. He waited 3 seconds. The reply came back. Arthur. Understood, Michael. Are you injured? Your father is ready to tear the city apart. Michael. I'm fine. Just handle Henderson. And Arthur? Look into the scholarship fund. I want it fully endowed. Forever. Arthur. Consider it done. Please come home. Michael turned off the phone. He looked at himself in the mirror. The bandage on his forehead was stark white against his skin. He wasn't just the rich kid anymore. He was a witness. He unlocked the door and walked out to the living room. Emily and Linda were sitting in silence. I'm sorry, Michael said. They both looked up. It's not your fault, Michael, Emily said, her voice tired. I know, Michael said. He sat on the edge of the couch. But maybe things will turn around. My grandpa used to say, the darkest hour is just before the dawn. It was a cliché, but he delivered it with a strange certainty. Your grandpa was an optimist, Linda said dryly. Get some sleep, Michael. We'll figure out where you go in the morning. Emily stood up. I'll get you a glass of water. She went to the kitchen. Michael followed her, standing in the doorway. Why did you really do it? He asked, his voice low. You knew the risk. You knew Henderson. Emily filled a glass with tap water. She turned to face him. Because you were hurting, she said simply. And everyone else just walked by. I couldn't be one of those people. I don't want to live in a world where we just walk by. She handed him the glass. Their fingers brushed. Thank you, Michael said, for seeing me. You're welcome, Michael Miller. He watched her walk to her bedroom. He lay down on the couch, staring at the ceiling. The ceiling had a water stain in the corner. The radiator clanked. It was the best night's sleep he had ever had. Sunlight filtered through the thin curtains, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Emily woke up with a heavy stone in her stomach. For a second, she forgot. Then the memory of the expulsion crashed down on her. She didn't have school today. She didn't have a future. She dragged herself out of bed and walked into the living room. The blanket on the couch was folded neatly in a military-style square. The pillow was fluffed. Michael was gone. Panic flared in her chest. Had he run away? Was he sick? Mom, Emily called out. Linda came out of her bedroom, tying her robe. What is it? Is he worse? He's gone. They found a note on the kitchen table. It was written on the back of a napkin in neat cursive handwriting. Emily and Linda, I have to go handle some family business. I can't stay and cause more trouble. Thank you for saving my life. I won't forget it. M. He left, Linda said, slumping into a chair. Just like that. We lost everything for a boy who didn't even say goodbye. He was scared, Mom. Emily defended him, though she felt a sting of rejection. He probably didn't want to be a burden. Well, burden or not, we have bigger problems. Linda pointed to the phone. I have to start calling temp agencies. Just then, the phone rang. It was a jarring, loud sound in the quiet apartment. Linda stared at it. It was the landline. Only bill collectors and the school had that number. It's probably Henderson calling to rub it in, Linda said bitterly, or to demand the uniforms back. She picked up the receiver. Hello? Emily watched her mother's face. She saw Linda's eyes go wide. Her mouth opened, then closed. She sat down slowly, her hand clutching the edge of the table. I don't understand, Linda stammered. Yes, I'm listening. Wait, say that again? A what? Emily stepped closer. Mom? Who is it? Linda waved her hand for silence. Yes, of course. We can be there in an hour. Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. Linda hung up the phone. She stared at the wall, stunned. Mom? That was the chairman of the school board, Linda whispered. Mr. Abernathy. The chairman? Why is he calling you? He said there's been a significant administrative error. Linda looked at Emily, her eyes filling with fresh tears. But these were different. These were tears of shock. He said Vice Principal Henderson has been placed on immediate administrative leave pending an investigation into misconduct. Emily's jaw dropped. What? There's more, Linda continued, her voice shaking. He said an anonymous benefactor contacted the school this morning. They have endowed a new staff excellence grant. My job is secure, and they want to offer me a promotion to facilities manager. It comes with a salary increase, a big one. And the expulsion? Emily asked, breathless. Rescinded, Linda said. Expunged from the record. And, Emily, they upgraded your scholarship. It's fully paid. Tuition, books, meals, everything. For all 4 years of college too, if you stay at Oak Creek. Emily grabbed the back of the chair to steady herself. I don't understand. How? Why? It hasn't even been 12 hours. The chairman said the benefactor was very specific. They saw an act of integrity that represented the true values of the school. Linda looked at the empty couch where Michael had slept. Do you think? No, Emily said, shaking her head. Michael didn't have insurance, Mom. He wore clothes that didn't fit. He was terrified of calling his dad. It couldn't be him. Then who? Maybe someone saw us, Emily reasoned. Maybe a teacher saw Henderson yelling at me and reported it. Maybe there's still some justice left in the world. Emily looked at the napkin on the table. I won't forget it. We have to go, Linda said, snapping out of her daze. We have a meeting with the chairman in an hour. Go get dressed. Put on your uniform, the clean one. As Emily ironed her shirt, she couldn't shake the feeling of Michael's hand in hers. She was relieved, overwhelmingly so, but she was also confused. The pieces didn't fit. But for now, she had won. She had stood her ground, and the ground hadn't crumbled. Monday morning at Oak Creek Academy arrived with a deceptive calm, the kind that usually precedes a hurricane. The storm had passed, leaving the campus scrubbed clean and glistening under a cold, bright sun. Emily Carter walked up the main steps, her backpack heavy on her shoulders, her breath misting in the frigid air. She felt different. The pavement felt solid under her feet. For the first time in 3 years, she didn't feel like she was trespassing on hallowed ground. She belonged here. The letter from the school board, signed and stamped, was folded neatly inside her chemistry textbook like a shield. However, the atmosphere inside the school was strange. Usually, the hallways were a cacophony of gossip, slamming lockers, and the shrieking laughter of the privileged. Today, there was a low, anxious hum. Conversations stopped when she walked by. Eyes followed her, not with the usual disdain, but with confusion. They knew something had happened to Vice Principal Henderson. His office was dark, the nameplate removed from the door. Rumors were flying. Embezzlement, a scandal, a family emergency. No one suspected that the daughter of the cleaning lady had toppled the tyrant. Emily kept her head high, channeling Grandpa Frank. Walk like you own the ground, Em, even if your shoes have holes in them. She reached her locker and dialed the combination. 12-24-05. The date her grandfather came home from the hospital for the last time. She opened the metal door and swapped her books. "I heard he was fired," a voice whispered nearby. "My dad said it was a corporate takeover or something. The board went nuclear over the weekend," another replied. Emily shut her locker. She turned and saw Brad Henderson leaning against the trophy case down the hall. He looked diminished. His usual swagger was gone, replaced by a nervous twitch in his jaw. He wasn't wearing his Letterman jacket. He was staring at his phone, his face pale. He looked up and locked eyes with Emily. For a second, she expected him to lunge, to shout, to blame her. Instead, he looked away. He looked afraid. Emily felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Michael's text message. "I have to handle some family business." Just then, a deep, resonant rumble vibrated through the floorboards. It wasn't thunder. It was the sound of engines, heavy, powerful engines. Students drifted toward the front windows. The low hum turned into a murmur of awe. "Who is that? Is that the governor? No, look at the plates. Those are diplomatic or something." Emily moved to the window. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Rolling up the long, curved driveway was a convoy of 4 black SUVs. They were massive, armored vehicles with tinted windows, flanking a sleek silver sedan that looked like it cost more than the entire school building. The convoy moved with predatory grace, bypassing the student drop-off zone and heading straight for the main administrative entrance, the one usually reserved for visiting dignitaries. The vehicles stopped in perfect unison. Uniformed security guards stepped out of the SUVs. They weren't the sleepy mall cops the school employed. These men wore earpieces and tailored suits that barely concealed the bulk of shoulder holsters. They scanned the perimeter with professional detachment. The rear door of the silver sedan opened. A collective gasp swept through the hallway. A boy stepped out. He wore the Oak Creek uniform, but it was different. The navy blazer was cut from Italian wool, tailored to perfection. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine. He moved with a fluid, confident grace that commanded attention. He turned, and the sunlight caught his face. It was Michael. But it wasn't the Michael who had bled on the locker room floor. It wasn't the shivering boy in the oversized sweatpants who had drunk tea in her kitchen. This was Michael Sterling. The jawline was the same. The gray eyes were the same. But the posture was transformed. He stood like a prince returning to reclaim a stolen kingdom. A small, flesh-colored bandage on his forehead was the only sign of the violence he had endured. "No way!" a girl beside Emily breathed. "Is that the charity kid?" "That's not a charity kid," a boy corrected her, his voice trembling. "That's the Sterling crest on the car. That's Richard Sterling's son." The hallway erupted into chaos. The name Sterling was royalty in this state. They owned the ports, the tech firms, the very land the school was built on. Emily couldn't move. She felt rooted to the linoleum. The betrayal and the relief warred in her chest. He had lied. He had lied about everything. The truck driver father, the poverty, the helplessness. He was one of them. He was the king of them. Michael didn't look at the gaping students in the windows. He buttoned his jacket and walked up the stairs, his security detail trailing a respectful 3 paces behind. The bell rang, but no one moved to class. Everyone flooded into the main corridor to see what would happen next. Emily stood her ground as the double doors swung open. Michael entered. The hallway fell silent. It was a heavy, suffocating silence. He walked down the center of the corridor, the sea of students parting for him instinctively. He didn't look left or right. He looked straight ahead, his expression unreadable. Brad Henderson was still standing by the trophy case, frozen. He looked like a deer in the headlights of a freight train. Michael stopped in front of Brad. The security guards halted, folding their hands behind their backs. Brad swallowed hard. "Michael, I didn't know." "Mr. Henderson," Michael said, His voice was calm, smooth, and utterly terrifying. It lacked any trace of the raspy pain from Friday night. "I trust your father received the severance package my legal team prepared?" Brad nodded, unable to speak. "Good," Michael said. The terms were generous, far more generous than he deserved. He is barred from the education sector in this state, effectively immediately. "And you?" Michael took a step closer. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You have a choice, Brad. You can finish your senior year here, quietly, respectfully, and without incident. Or you can leave today. But if you ever mistake cruelty for strength again, I will ensure that the only team you ever captain is a prison work crew. Do we understand each other?" "Yes," Brad whispered. "Yes." "Excellent." Michael adjusted his cuffs. "Get to class." Brad scrambled away, disappearing into the crowd. The hierarchy of Oak Creek Academy had just been decapitated and reorganized in under 60 seconds. Michael turned. The mask of the ruthless Heir slipped, just for a fraction of a second. He scanned the crowd. He was looking for someone. His eyes found Emily. She was standing by the lockers, clutching her book to her chest. She didn't look impressed. She looked hurt. Michael walked toward her. The crowd watched, breathless. The billionaire Heir was walking toward the janitor's daughter. He stopped 3 feet away. He respected her space. "You lied," Emily said. Her voice was quiet, but in the silence of the hall, it carried. "I omitted the truth," Michael corrected gently. "There is a difference." "Not to me," Emily said. "You let me believe you were alone. You let my mother worry about feeding you. You let us risk everything for you, and you could have bought the hospital." "If I had told you who I was," Michael said, his gray eyes searching hers, "would you have helped me? Or would you have seen the name and walked away, assuming I was just another Brad?" Emily opened her mouth to argue, but the words died in her throat. She knew he was right. She hated the rich kids at this school. She had prejudice of her own. If she had known he was a sterling, she might have hesitated. She might have assumed he deserved it. "I needed to know," Michael continued, his voice lowering so only she could hear. "I needed to know if anyone in this place had a soul. I found one person, only one." "You played a game with us," Emily said, her eyes stinging. "My mom cried over that expulsion notice, Michael." "And I fixed it," Michael said intensely. "I fixed it all. Your mother is safe. Your future is safe. I pay my debts, Emily." "It wasn't a transaction," Emily snapped, her anger flaring. "I didn't help you to get a scholarship. I helped you because you were bleeding on the floor. That's what you don't get. You think you can just write a check and fix the fear? You can't." She turned on her heel and walked away. The entire school watched as Emily Carter, the girl with the second-hand uniform, turned her back on the prince of the city. Michael watched her go. He didn't follow. He signaled to his security chief, a burly man named Arthur, who was waiting by the door. "Let her go," Michael murmured. "Sir?" Arthur asked. "The headmaster is waiting for you." "The headmaster can wait," Michael said, watching Emily's blonde ponytail disappear around the corner. "I have to earn forgiveness, and that is going to be harder than buying the building." Later that day, Emily tried to focus on the periodic table, but her mind was racing. The school was buzzing. Everyone wanted to be her friend now. Girls who had never spoken to her were suddenly complimenting her hair. Boys were nodding at her in the halls. It was sickening. They didn't care about her. They cared that the sterling boy had singled her out. She sat at her lab table, staring at a beaker of clear liquid. "Is this seat taken?" She didn't look up. "Go away, Michael." Michael sat down anyway on the stool next to her. He placed his expensive leather bag on the floor. The chemistry teacher, Mrs. Gable, looked up, saw who it was, and immediately looked back down at her papers. No one was going to tell Michael Sterling where to sit. "I'm not here to buy you off," Michael said. He opened his textbook. It was brand new. "Then why are you here?" "Because I have chemistry this period." And because I want to explain. Explain what? That you're actually a billionaire who likes to cosplay as a victim? Emily scribbled furiously in her notebook. My father has many enemies, Michael said quietly. He didn't look at her. He looked straight ahead at the chalkboard. Kidnapping attempts, threats, corporate espionage. I've lived my entire life behind walls and tinted glass. This year, I convinced him to let me attend a normal school. Just for 1 year. I wanted to see what the real world was like. Emily paused her writing. She remembered the loneliness in his voice at the hospital. So I came here, Michael went on. I used my mother's name. I wore old clothes. I wanted to be invisible. But I found out that being poor makes you invisible in a different way, a dangerous way. Brad targeted you because he thought you were weak, Emily said. Yes, and I let him. Because if I fought back, if I used my training, my cover would be blown. So I took the hits. He turned to her. Until Friday. Friday, I thought I was going to die on that floor. And then you walked in. Emily looked at him. She saw the bandage on his forehead. She remembered the blood on her hands. You risked everything for a nobody, Michael said. That's rare, Emily. It's the most incredible thing I've ever seen. I was just doing my job, Emily said, her defenses weakening slightly. Grandpa Frank would have haunted me if I didn't. Grandpa Frank raised a warrior, Michael said with a small smile. He reached into his blazer pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He placed it on the table between them. Emily stiffened. I told you, I don't want your money. It's not money, Michael said. Open it. Emily hesitated. She reached out and flipped the lid. Inside was not a diamond or a gold necklace or a check. It was a medal. An old, tarnished silver medal with a faded ribbon. It was a purple heart. Emily gasped. She looked up at him. Where did you get this? I had my team track down your grandfather's service records, Michael said. He sold this in 1998 to pay for your grandmother's surgery. It was in a pawn shop in Seattle. I bought it back. Emily's hands trembled as she touched the cold metal. She knew the story. Grandpa Frank never talked about the medal he lost, but she knew it broke his heart to sell it. It belongs to your family, Michael said softly. No strings attached. Just, thank you. Tears pricked Emily's eyes. This was different. This wasn't a billionaire throwing cash at a problem. This was someone who had listened, someone who understood what actually mattered to her. You're still a liar, she whispered, wiping her eyes. I know, Michael said. I'm working on it. And you're attracting a lot of attention. Emily gestured to the class. Every student was watching them, pretending not to. Let them watch, Michael said, his gaze hardening as he looked around the room. They need to know where I stand. And where do you stand, Michael? Right here, he said, meeting her eyes again. Next to the only person who matters. The bell rang. Michael stood up and picked up his bag. I have to go meet with the security team. My father is flying in tonight. He wants to meet you. Emily's eyes went wide. Your father? Richard Sterling? He wants to thank the girl who saved his son, and… Michael smirked, a flash of the boy she had teased in the car. He wants to thank the woman who yelled at the chairman of the board on the phone. Apparently, your mother has a very formidable phone voice. Emily laughed. It was a short, startled sound, but it broke the tension. She does. I'll pick you up at 7, Michael said. Wear something nice. Not because you have to impress him, but because we're going to the impossible-to-get-into Italian place downtown. Is that a request or a command? Emily asked, raising an eyebrow. It's a plea, Michael said honestly. Please let me do this. Let me be the guy who takes you to dinner. Just Michael. Emily looked at the medal in her hand. She looked at the boy who was trying so hard to bridge the gap between their worlds. Okay, she said. 7 o'clock, but if you wear a tie, I'm leaving. Michael grinned. It was a real smile, lighting up his face. Deal. He walked out of the lab, leaving Emily holding a piece of her family's history, her heart racing in a way that had nothing to do with adrenaline and everything to do with the dangerous, complicated boy who had just walked back into her life. The restaurant, Le Ciel, sat atop the city's tallest skyscraper, a glass needle piercing the night clouds. To get there, one had to take a private elevator that ascended so smoothly it felt less like movement and more like a change in air pressure. Emily stood in the brass-paneled car next to Michael. She wore a simple black dress she had bought for a funeral 2 years ago, paired with a cardigan she had ironed 3 times. She felt small, not just because of the height, but because of the weight of the expectation pressing down on her. Michael sensed it. He didn't take her hand. There were cameras in the elevator, but he shifted his stance, angling his body to shield her from the mirrored reflection. "He's going to test you," Michael said, his voice barely a whisper. "He does it to everyone. His board members, his rivals, his chefs. Don't try to impress him. Just be the person who yelled at Brad Henderson." "I didn't yell at Brad," Emily corrected, staring at the floor numbers climbing. "I just told him the truth." "Exactly." The doors slid open. The noise of the restaurant was a low, sophisticated murmur of crystal on china and hushed power deals. The maitre d' did not ask for a reservation. He simply bowed, a gesture of profound deference, and led them to a corner table that overlooked the entire glittering sprawl of the city. A man sat there. He was reading a dossier on a tablet, a glass of sparkling water untouched beside him. Richard Sterling looked exactly like his photos in the Wall Street Journal, only older. The lines around his eyes were etched deep, the cost of building an empire. He wore a suit that cost more than Emily's mother made in a decade. He didn't look up as they approached. He finished the paragraph he was reading, tapped the screen off, and then, with deliberate slowness, raised his eyes. They were gray, like Michael's, but where Michael's were stormy, Richard's were steel. "Father," Michael said, "this is Emily Carter." Richard Sterling didn't stand. He gestured to the empty chair. "Sit." Emily sat. She placed her hands in her lap to hide a slight tremor. Grandpa Frank's voice echoed in her ear. "When you sit with a general, you keep your back straight and your eyes forward. You are not a subordinate, you are a citizen." "The calamari is excellent here," Richard said, opening the menu. "But I assume you've never had it." It was a subtle jab, a reminder of her station. "I'm allergic to shellfish," Emily lied smoothly. She wasn't, but she refused to let him order for her. "I'll have the roasted chicken." Richard paused. A flicker of interest sparked in his eyes. "Practical. I like practical." He handed the menu to the waiter without looking at him. "So, Ms. Carter, you are the young woman who dragged my son through a hallway." "I dragged a patient to safety," Emily corrected him. Who he was didn't matter at the time. "Didn't it?" Richard leaned forward, interlacing his fingers. "You're a scholarship student. Your mother was, a custodian. You live in a zip code that my security team considers a red zone. You're telling me that when you saw a boy in an expensive uniform, you didn't see an opportunity?" Michael started to speak. "Dad?" "Quiet, Michael," Richard commanded, his eyes never leaving Emily's face. "I am speaking to Emily. The world is transactional, Ms. Carter. Everyone wants something. You saved him. Now you have a full scholarship, your mother has a promotion, and you're dining at Le Ciel. That is a very high return on investment for 20 minutes of work." The accusation hung in the air, heavy and ugly. He was calling her a mercenary. He was suggesting that her compassion was a calculated gamble. Emily felt the heat rise in her cheeks. Not embarrassment, anger. The clean, white-hot anger of the righteous. She reached into her purse. She didn't pull out a phone or a tissue. She pulled out the velvet box Michael had given her earlier. She opened it and took out the Purple Heart. She placed the medal on the white tablecloth, right next to Richard's sparkling water. The tarnished silver looked violent against the pristine setting. "Do you know what this is, Mr. Sterling?" Emily asked. Richard looked at the medal. His expression didn't change, but his fingers twitched. It's a Purple Heart, mid-century issue. It belonged to my grandfather, Emily said. He was a medic. He crawled into a mortar crater in 1951 to patch up a man he didn't know. He took shrapnel in his leg that pained him every single day until he died. He didn't get a scholarship for it. He didn't get a promotion. He got a limp and this piece of metal. She leaned forward, matching Richard's intensity. He taught me that you help people because they are human beings, not because they are investments. I didn't know Michael was a Sterling. I didn't care. He was bleeding. He was scared. And he was alone because everyone else in that school, the people you pay to educate him, were too busy worrying about their reputation to help him. She pushed the medal slightly toward him. If you think I did it for money, you can have the scholarship back. You can fire my mother. We survived before you, Mr. Sterling. We will survive after you. But don't you dare insult the one thing I have that you can't buy. Silence descended on the table. Even the waiters seemed to freeze. Michael looked at Emily with a mixture of awe and terror. No one spoke to Richard Sterling that way. No one. Richard stared at the medal. Then he looked at Emily. He looked at her cheap dress, her defiant chin, her shaking hands that she forced to be still. Slowly, a smile spread across his face. It wasn't the shark-like grin of a businessman. It was genuine. It was respectful. 1951, Richard said softly. My father served in 51, the 24th Infantry. Grandpa was in the 24th, Emily whispered, caught off guard. Richard nodded. He picked up the medal, handling it with a reverence that shocked her. Then it is entirely possible, Miss Carter, that your grandfather knew mine. Or perhaps he even patched him up. He handed the medal back to her. I apologize, Richard said. Emily blinked. Excuse me? I said I apologize. I had to know. I have surrounded my son with sharks his entire life. I needed to know if you were another shark or if you were the water. Richard signaled the waiter. Bring us the vintage Cabernet and the chicken for everyone. He looked at Michael. You chose well. The dinner that followed was surreal. The interrogation was over. In its place was a conversation. Richard asked about her studies. He asked about her mother's work ethic. He didn't treat her like a charity case. He treated her like a peer. As the dessert arrived, a chocolate sculpture that looked too expensive to eat, Richard wiped his mouth with a linen napkin. There is one final piece of business, Richard said. The loose end. Henderson? Michael asked. Henderson is handled. Richard waved a hand dismissively. But the system that allowed him to thrive, that is the problem. I don't like problems. He pulled a document from his inner jacket pocket and slid it across the table to Emily. What is this? Emily asked. It's a deed of trust, Richard explained. As of this morning, the Oak Creek Academy is under new management. The board of directors has been dissolved. I bought the controlling interest in the school. Emily's eyes widened. You bought the school? I like to control my environment, Richard said simply. But I am a busy man. I cannot run a high school. I need someone on the ground who understands the facility. Someone who knows where the cracks are. Someone who cares about the foundation, not just the facade. He tapped the paper. I have appointed a new director of operations for the entire campus. It is a largely administrative role, focusing on student welfare and facility maintenance. It pays significantly more than a custodial wage. Emily read the name on the contract. Linda Carter. You're making my mother the boss? Emily asked, her voice choking up. I'm making your mother the guardian, Richard corrected. She has been cleaning up messes there for 10 years. It's time she had the authority to prevent them. He looked at Emily. And as for you, there is a clause in the scholarship fund. It requires the recipient to complete a summer internship. I have an opening in my philanthropic division. It involves traveling to medical clinics in developing nations, identifying needs, allocating resources, fixing broken things. He paused. It seems suited to your particular skill set. Emily looked at Michael. He was beaming. I'd like that, Emily said. I'd like that very much. Good. Richard checked his watch and stood up. I have a plane to London in an hour. Michael, take her home, and drive slowly. It's raining again. Richard Sterling walked away without looking back. But as he reached the elevator, Emily saw him stop and touch his own lapel, as if checking for a medal that wasn't there. The silver sedan glided through the streets of the city. The rain had returned, soft and steady, blurring the lights of the skyline into streaks of gold and red. Michael didn't use the partition this time. He sat close to Emily, the silence between them comfortable rather than heavy. You were amazing, he said, breaking the quiet. I thought he was going to have a heart attack when you put the medal on the table. I was terrified, Emily admitted, leaning her head back against the leather seat and letting out a long breath she felt she'd been holding for hours. But I figured, what's the worst he could do? Expel me again? Michael laughed. It was a warm, genuine sound. He reached out and took her hand. His grip was firm, grounding. They pulled up to her apartment building. It looked the same as it always had. The peeling paint, the flickering street lamp, the wet pavement. But to Emily, it felt different. It wasn't a trap anymore. It was just a place. A starting line. The driver opened the door, and Emily stepped out into the cool night air. Michael followed her to the awning of the building to keep her out of the rain. So, Emily said, turning to face him. See you in chemistry? Actually, Michael said, rubbing the back of his neck nervously. I was thinking of switching to biology. Mrs. Gable scares me. She scares everyone. Stick with it. I'll tutor you. I was hoping you'd say that. Michael looked at her. He didn't move to leave. He stood there, searching her face as if trying to memorize it. He looked like he wanted to say something more, something that didn't fit in the back of an armored sedan or a crowded hallway. Instead, he simply squeezed her hand again, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. A small, silent promise. Thank you, he whispered, his gray eyes holding hers in the dim light. For not walking by. I never will, Emily said softly. See you tomorrow, Emily. See you tomorrow, Michael. Emily watched the car drive away until the taillights disappeared into the wet darkness. She stood there for a moment longer than necessary, a small smile touching her lips. She turned and walked up the 3 flights of stairs, her steps lighter than they had been in years. She opened the door to the apartment. Her mother was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a letter that had been hand-delivered by a courier an hour ago. Mom? Emily asked. Linda looked up. Her eyes were red, but she was smiling. A smile so big it looked foreign on her tired face. Did you know? Linda asked, holding up the contract. I had a hunch, Emily smiled. She walked over and hugged her mother. They stood there in the small kitchen, holding on to each other. The wind howled outside, rattling the window pane, but inside, it was warm. The world hadn't changed completely. There were still storms. There were still broken things. But for the first time, Emily knew she didn't have to just survive the storm. She could weather it. She looked at the counter where her grandfather's picture sat in a chipped wooden frame. The old soldier looked back at her, stern and proud. Keep your head down and your eyes open, he had said. Emily reached out and touched the glass. Head up, Grandpa, she whispered. Head up. And that is where we leave Emily, standing in the quiet after the rain, finally knowing she can weather any storm. Whenever I share a journey like hers, I hope it gives you a chance to step out of your everyday battles and just drift for a bit. I'd love to know what you were doing while listening. Maybe you were listening with a hot cup of tea, sitting on the porch watching the rain, or just settling in for a calm evening. Drop a line in the comments. I really do read them all. And if you want to make sure we cross paths again, hitting like and subscribing makes a huge difference. We are always trying to improve our storytelling, so feel free to drop your feedback in the comment section below. Thanks for spending this time with me.